A reading of Jonathon Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. It was morning, and the new sun sparkled gold across the ripples of the gentle sea. A mile from shore, a fishing boat chummed the water, and the word for breakfast block flashed through the air, till a crowd of 1,000 seagulls came to dodge and fight for bits of food. It was another busy day beginning. But way off, alone, out by himself, beyond boat and shore, Jonathon Livingston Seagull was practicing. 100 feet in the sky, he lowered his web beat, lifted his beak, and strained to hold a painful, hard, twisting curve through his wings. The curve meant that he would fly slowly, and now he slowed until the wind was a whisper in his face, until the ocean stood still beneath him. He narrowed his eyes in fierce concentration, held his breath, forced one single more inch of curve. Then his feathers ruffled, he stalled, and fell. Seagulls, as you know, never falter, never stall. To stall in the air for them is disgrace and dishonor. But Jonathon Livingston Seagull, unashamed, stretching his wings again in that trembling hard curve, slowing and slowing and stalling once more, was no ordinary bird. Most gulls don't bother to learn more than the simplest facts of flight. How to get to shore, to food, and back again. For most gulls, it is not flying that matters, but eating. For this gull, though, it was not eating that mattered, but flight. More than anything else, Jonathon Livingston Seagull loved to fly. This type of thinking, he found, was not the way to make oneself popular with other birds. Even his parents were dismayed as Jonathon spent whole days alone making hundreds of low-level glides, experimenting. He didn't know why, for instance, but when he flew at altitudes less than half his wingspan above the water, he could stay in the air longer with less efforts. His glides ended not with the usual feet-down splash into the sea, but with a long, flat wake as he touched the surface with his feet tightly streamlined against his body. When he began sliding into feet-up landing on the beach, then practicing the length of his slide in the sand, his parents were very much dismayed indeed. "Why, John, why?" his mother asked. "Why is it so hard to be like the rest of the flock, John? Why can't you leave low flying to the pelicans and the albatross? Why don't you eat, son, your bone and feathers?" "I don't mind being bone and feathers, Mom. I just want to know what I can do in the air and what I can't. That's all. I just want to know." "See here, Jonathon," said his father, not unkindly. "Winter isn't far away. Boats will be few, and the surface fish will be swimming deep. If you must study, then study food and how to get it. This flying business is all very well, but you can't eat a glide, you know. Don't you forget that the reason why you fly is to eat." Jonathon nodded obediently. For the next few days he tried to behave like the other gulls. He really tried. Screeching and fighting with the flock around the piers and fishing boats, diving on scraps of fish and bread. But he couldn't make it work. It's all so pointless, he thought, deliberately dropping a hard-won anchovy to a hungry old gull chasing him. I could be spending all of this time learning to fly. There's so much to learn. It wasn't long before Jonathon Gull was off by himself again, far out at sea, hungry, happy, learning. The subject was speed, and in a week's practice he learned more about speed than the fastest gull alive. From 1,000 feet, flapping his wings as hard as he could, he pushed over into a blazing steep dive toward the waves and learned why seagulls don't make blazing steep power dives. In just 6 seconds, he was moving 70 miles per hour, the speed at which one's wings goes unstable on the upstroke. Time after time it happened. Careful as he was, working the very peak of his ability, he lost control at high speeds. Climbed to 1,000 feet, full power, straight ahead first, then pushed over, flapping to a vertical dive. Then every time his left wing stalled on the upstroke, he rolled violently left, stalled, his right wing recovering, and flicked like fire into a wild, tumbling spin to his right. He couldn't be careful enough on that upstroke. 10 times he tried, and all 10 times as he pushed through 70 miles per hour, he burst into a churning mass of feathers, out of control, crashing down into the sea. The key, he thought at last, dripping wet, must be to hold the wings still at high speed, to flap up to 50, then hold the wings still. From 2,000 feet he tried again, rolling his dive, beak straight down, wings full out, stable from the moment he passed 50 miles per hour. It took tremendous strength, but it worked. In 10 seconds he blurred through 90 miles per hour. Jonathon had set the world speed record for seagulls. But victory was short-lived. The instant he began his pull-out, the instant he changed the angle of his wings, he snapped into that same terrible, uncontrolled disaster, and at 90 miles per hour, it hit him like dynamite. Jonathon Seagull exploded in mid-air and smashed into the brick, hard sea. When he came to, it was well after dark, and he floated in the moonlight at the surface of the ocean. His wings were ragged bars of lead, but the weight of failure was even heavier on his back. He wished feebly that the weight could be just enough to drag him gently to the bottom and end it all. As he sank low in the water, a strange, hollow voice sounded within him. "There's no way around it. I am a seagull. I am limited by my nature. If I were meant to learn so much about flying, I'd have charts for brains. If I were meant to fly at speed, I'd have a falcon's short wings and live on mice instead of fish. My father was right. I must forget this foolishness. I must fly home to the flock and be content as I am, as a poor limited seagull." The voice faded, and Jonathon agreed. The place for a seagull at night is on shore, and from this moment forth he vowed he would become a normal gull. It would make everyone happier. He pushed wearily away from the dark waters and flew toward land, grateful for what he had learned about work-saving, low-altitude flying. But no, he thought, I am done with the way I was. I am done with everything I've learned. I am a seagull like every other seagull, and I will fly like one. So he climbed painfully to 100 feet and flapped his wings harder, pressing for shore. He felt better for his decision to be just another one of the flock. There would be no ties now to the forces that had driven him to learn. There would be no more challenge and no more failure. And it was pretty just to stop thinking and fly through the dark toward the lights on the beach. Dark, the hollow voice cracked in alarm. Seagulls never fly in the dark. Jonathon was not alert to listen. It's pretty, he thought, the moon and the lights twinkling on the water, throwing out little beacon trails through the night. And it's all so peaceful and still. Get down, seagulls never fly in the dark. If you were meant to fly in the dark, you would have the eyes of an owl. You'd have charts for brains. You would have a falcon's short wings. There in the night, 100 feet in the air, Jonathon Livingston Seagull blinked. His pain, his resolution, banished. Short wings. A falcon's short wings. That's the answer. What a fool I've been. All I need is a tiny little wing. All I need is to fold most of my wings and fly on just the tips alone. Short wings. He climbed 2,000 feet above the Black Sea, and without a moment of thought of failure and death, he brought his forewings tightly into his body, left only the narrow swept daggers of his wings tips extended into the wind, and fell into a vertical dive. The wind was a monster roar at his head, 70 miles per hour, 90, 120, and faster still. The wing straining now at 140 miles per hour wasn't nearly as hard as it had been before at 70. And with the faintest twist of his wingtips, he eased out of the dive and shot above the waters, a gray cannonball under the moon. He closed his eyes to slits against the wind and rejoiced. 140 miles per hour and under control. If I dive from 5,000 feet instead of 2,000 feet, I wonder how fast. His vows of a moment before were forgotten, swept away in that great swift wind. Yet he felt guiltless breaking promises he made himself. Such promises are only for the gulls that accept the ordinary. One who has touched excellence in his learning has no need of that kind of promise. By sunup, Jonathon Gull was practicing again. From 5,000 feet, the fishing boats were specks in the flat blue water. Breakfast flock was a faint cloud of dust motes circling. He was alive, trembling ever so slightly with delight, proud that his fear was under control. Then without ceremony he hugged in his forewings, extended his short-angled wingtips, and plunged directly toward the sea. By the time he passed 4,000 feet, he had reached terminal velocity. The wind was a solid beating wall of sound against which he could move no faster. He was flying now straight down at 214 miles per hour. He swallowed, knowing that if his wings unfolded at that speed, he would be blown into 1,000,000 tiny shreds of seagull. But the speed was power, and the speed was joy, and the speed was pure beauty. He began his pull-out at 1,000 feet, wingtips thundering and blurring in that gigantic wind. The boats and the crowd of gulls tilting and growing meteor fast directly in his path. He couldn't stop. He didn't know yet even how to turn at that speed. Collision would be instant death. And so he shut his eyes. It happened that morning, then, just after sunrise, that Jonathon Livingston Seagull fired directly to the center of breakfast flock, ticking off 212 miles per hour, eyes closed, and that great roaring shriek of wind and feathers. The gull of fortune smiled upon him this once, and no one was killed. By the time he pulled his beak straight up into the sky, he was still scorching along at 160 miles per hour. When he had slowed to 20 and stretched his wings again at last, the boats were a crumb on the sea 4,000 feet below. His thought was triumph. Terminal velocity. A seagull at 214 miles per hour. It was a breakthrough, the greatest single moment in the history of the flock. And in that moment a new age opened for Jonathon Gull. Flying out to his lonely practice area, folding his wings for a dive 8,000 feet, he set himself at once to discover how to turn. A single wingtip feather, he found, moved at a fraction of an inch, gives a smooth, sweeping curve at tremendous speed. Before he learned this, however, he found that moving more than one feather at that speed will spin you like a rifle ball, and Jonathon had flown the first aerobatics of any seagull on earth. He spared no time that day with talk with other birds, but flew on past sunset. He discovered the loop, the roll, the point roll, the inverted spin, the gull bunt, and the pinwheel. When Jonathon Seagull joined the flock on the beach, it was full night. He was dizzy and terribly tired. Yet in delight, he flew a loop to landing with a snap roll just before touchdown. When they hear of it, he thought, of the breakthrough, they'll be wild with joy. How much more there is now to living, instead of our drab slogging forth and back to fishing boats. There's a reason to life. We can live ourselves out of ignorance. We can find ourselves as creatures of excellence and intelligence and skill. We can be free. We can learn to fly. The years ahead hummed and glowed with promise. The gulls were flocked into the council gathering when he landed. And apparently had been so flocked for some time. They were, in fact, waiting. Jonathon Livingston Seagull, stand a center. The elder's words sounded in a voice of the highest ceremony. Stand a center meant only great shame or great honor. Stand a center for honor was the way the gulls' foremost leaders were marked. Of course, he thought. The breakfast flock this morning, they saw the breakthrough. I want no honors. I have no wish to be leader. I want only to share what I found, to show those horizons out ahead for us all. He stepped forward. Jonathon Livingston Seagull, said the elder, stand a center for shame in the sight of your fellow gulls. It felt like being hit with a board. His knees went weak. His feathers sagged. There was a roaring in his ears. Centered for shame? Impossible. The breakthrough. They can't understand. They're wrong. They're wrong. For his reckless irresponsibility, the solemn voice intoned, violating the dignity and the tradition of the Gull family. To be centered for shame meant that he would be cast out of Gull society, banished to the solitary lifts on the far cliffs. One day, Jonathon Livingston Seagull, you shall learn that irresponsibility does not pay. Life is the unknown and the unknowable, except that we are put into this world to eat and to stay alive as long as we possibly can. A seagull never speaks back to the council flock, but it was Jonathon's voice raised. Irresponsibility? My brothers? Who is more responsible than the gull who finds and follows a meaning? A higher purpose for life. For 1,000 years we have scrabbled after fish heads. But now we have a reason to live, to learn, to discover, to be free. Give me one chance. Let me show you what I found. The flock might as well have been stone. The brotherhood is broken, the gulls intoned together, and with one accord they solemnly closed their ears and turned their backs upon him. Jonathon Seagull spent the rest of his days alone, but he flew away out beyond the far cliffs. His one sorrow was not solitude. It was that the other gulls refused to believe the glory of flight that awaited them. They refused to open their eyes and see. He learned more each day. He learned that a streamline high-speed dive could bring him to find the rare and tasty fish that schooled 10 feet below the surface of the ocean. He no longer needed fishing boats and stale bread for survival. He learned to sleep in the air, setting a course at night across the offshore wind, covering 100 miles from sunset to sunrise. With the same inner control, he flew through heavy sea fogs and climbed above them into dazzling clear skies. In the very times other gulls stood on the ground knowing nothing more than mist and rain, he learned to ride the high winds far inland, to dine there on delicate insects. What he had once hoped for the flock, he now gained for himself alone. He learned to fly, and was not sorry for the price that he had paid. Jonathon Seagull discovered that boredom and fear and anger are the reasons that a gull's life is so short, and with these gone from his thoughts, he lived a long, fine life indeed. They came in the morning then, and found Jonathon gliding peacefully and alone through his beloved sky. The gulls that appeared at his wings were pure as starlight, and the glow from them was gentle and friendly in the high night air. But most lovely of all was the skill with which they flew, their wingtips moving at a precise and constant inch from his own. Without a word, Jonathon put them to his test, a test that no gull ever passed. He twisted his wings, slowed to a single mile per hour above stall. The two radiant birds slowed with him, smoothly locked in position. They knew about slow flying. He folded his wings, rolled and dropped into a dive to 190 miles per hour. They dropped with him, streaking down in flawless formation. At last he turned that speed straight up into a long vertical slow roll. They rolled with him, smiling. He recovered to level flight and was quiet for some time before he spoke. "Very well," he said. "Who are you?" "We are from your flock, Jonathon. We are your brothers." The words were strong and calm. "We've come to take you higher, to take you home." "Home I have none. Flock I have none. I am outcast, and we fly now at the peak of the great mountain wind. Beyond a few 100 feet, I can lift this old body no higher." "But you can, Jonathon, for you have learned. One school is finished, and the time has come for another to begin." As it had shined across him all of his life, so understanding lightened that moment for Jonathon Seagull. They were right. He could fly higher, and it was time to go home. He gave one last look across the sky, across that magnificent silvery land where he had learned so much. "I'm ready," he said at last, and Jonathon Livingston Seagull rose with the two star-bright gulls to disappear into a perfect dark sky.